Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? What's up, everybody? I'm Phil.
And I'm Cameron.
Two Navy vets, just here to talk politics.
We're here with some differing views, but we're here to have a civil and a healthy discussion.
Thanks for tuning in to Pocket Politics.
All right, well, welcome to the first edition of Pocket Politics.
What's up? I'm Phil. I realize that nobody is actually listening to this, so we're just talking for the fun of it at this point. But thanks for tuning in, if in case somebody is actually listening and does tune into this podcast.
Yeah. Well, my name's Cameron, and we're going to do, quite honestly, what we think we do pretty darn good, and that is chat about politics here. So, with that being said, Phil, what do you think?
I think this week we got to start with January 6th hearings. I think Tuesday was a dud. I'm not going to lie. I didn't learn a whole lot. I thought that it was going to be the biggest one, having Brad Raffensperger and his media officer, the chief operating officer, or whatever they call that guy, testify. And I was a little bit disappointed. Maybe that's because I got my hopes up too much. Maybe not. What do you think? Tuesday was kind of a...
Yeah, so, I mean, to be fair, right, I think they're all telling a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we're seeing as we go along, is that the design of it is all to tell a story. And I think it's more, I think in some ways it's almost like they're running a marathon with it, and they don't want to just sprint out. I mean, we've always had this marathon discussion, or I say people in general talk about running marathons, right? And how you don't want to just, blow all your energy in the first few minutes. I almost think that they're... or the way they're working the January 6th thing is kind of marathon-esque in a way, right? I mean, they come out strong out the gate, right?
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago when they had their first one on prime time, and now I think they're more in that pacing themselves in the race. Now, again, was Tuesday a huge, did the earth shut down and, whatever? No, but I mean, I think they're just telling the story as they go along, and each week each time they'll add pieces to the puzzle. My thoughts.
I agree with you. However, I think that every committee hearing so far, we've learned something that was big. This committee hearing, we didn't really learn too much. Now, if you look at Thursdays was like a fucking A-bomb, right? Like, yeah. Thursdays was huge. I learned a ton of stuff. I mean, just the fact that these guys asked for pardons. I mean, Gates... Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Jim Jordan, Louis Gohmert, Scott Perry, all members of Congress that asked for pardons. And come on now, like, pleading the fifth is one thing. We all know you're guilty if you plead the fifth, right?
Theoretically.
we all, I mean, but realistically, we know, right? Because it's like the fifth is a way to get out of incriminating yourself, and making the body of evidence do it. Asking for a pardon? Come on.
So that was big. That's certainly, I think that caught a lot of attention. I think as they went along, right? I mean, I think people saw that. I think they, certainly people were listening to that. But the thing about it is, and I will say this about the January 6th thing is, and maybe I'll just pose this as a question to you, is it moving the needle at all? I mean, in other words, are the same people watching January 6th are the same people that have said all along, well, I think Trump's guilty. I think he did something wrong. And then the other half is just dug their heels in and said, I don't even want to see that. I don't want to listen to it. I'm a fan of the former president, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I really don't know that the needle is moving.
I will tell you, I strongly believe the needle is moving. And I base this on two things. The first thing I base it on is that since the January hearing started, we watch Chris polls in comparison with DeSantis in Florida swing massively. He's within 1 point right now, as of like Thursday, I think. And since last October, granted that was before the hearings had started and before the shooting in Uvalde, Beto's swung almost 10 points, and now he's only 5 points behind. And I think last October he was like 15. I could be slightly wrong about
Yeah.
the timeline, but whatever.
And polls ebb and flow.
And they do, and I don't trust them for the most part anyway, because I've never once been polled in my life. I think you have to own a landline to get a lot of the polls. And I don't
Traditionally,
own, and I haven't,
you did.
Yeah, and I haven't owned a landline or had a landline in a long time. Okay, more importantly, here's the second thing that I think is all my veteran friends on Facebook, who all seem to have turned into Fox News mongers, with the exception of like 2 or 3, maybe, like you and my buddy Rob, that's a school teacher, that I'd like to have join us on a discussion at some point, and like one other dude. Everybody else is a Fox News monger, conservative troll, fucking asshole, right? And here's why I believe that they're seeing this information and they're accepting it and thinking it's a reality, is because they're not saying anything about it. And I think they said stuff about the impeachment trials, and they said stuff about the other things, that it was, they're just out to get him, or it's a witch hunt, and they're repeating the Donald Trump talking points, essentially. But this thing they're being completely silent about, and I think it's because they know it's true. And I think the committee has done an excellent job at setting that up for us.
Yeah, so I'll give you, I will give you the committee thing. I mean, I think the committee's done a ton of work.
Hey, also, real quick, not to interrupt you, but Jim Jordan, one of the congressmen that asked for pardons, who's probably like, he's basically a sex offender from Ohio, right?
The former wrestling coach.
Allegedly, the former wrestling coach, who's probably, or allegedly a sex offender. Whatever, we'll leave that with what it is, was supposed to be on the January 6th committee.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
Well, that was who McCarthy, one of the names that he had appointed, right? That was early on. It was going to be, well, here's who I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you Jim Jordan. I don't remember who the other. There was 2 prominent ones that stood out, Jordan and one other one that I know McCarthy had tried to put forward for the committee. But regardless,
yeah,
right?
Jordan noteworthy because he turns out to actually be a fucking insurrectionist.
So
and ask for a pardon.
So there's the pardon piece, right? I will say this. I think, again, I think the committee has done a good job of working, of laying out their case, right? Every time I turn around, it seems like they've got new material, and I can only imagine the amount of hours that went into doing this. Now, granted, they got plenty of helpers, et cetera. It's not a one-man show or one-woman show. But so here's my thoughts on it. I think, number one, one thing that probably does hinder them getting out information is the fact that it comes on, well, we started out in prime time. Now they're middle of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Late morning, early afternoon, whatever, depending on where you're at in the country. Your average person is working during that time and not around a television. Now, I get it, right? Some people watch it that evening, whatever, but your average person's not.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get clips, and they're going to get clips from whatever news channel they watch or whatever, I guess, podcast, whatever. They're going to get clips here and there, possibly from an internet soundbite. So they're getting clips, but they're not necessarily, the country as a whole really isn't, I don't think, seeing that much of this. But again, some of these clips are maybe all they need to see. Mm-hmm. Again, we'll see how that kind of plays out in the coming weeks and months. But as far as all this goes, though, I really think, there is a segment of the country that has just tuned this out and said, I don't want to see it. I don't necessarily believe it, etc. And I think there's a segment of the country that is chomping at the bit to see what they can. But then I think there's a lot of just casual observers, right? And it kind of goes back to that where I think the country kind of lies. I think there's that 20 on the fringe right, 20 on the fringe left, somewhere in that percentage. And then that 60-ish% that kind of lays in the middle. And some of that middle is certainly middle right, and some of it's certainly middle left. But I think there's a lot of middle of the country. And that's where I think it may make an impact, is with kind of your middle of the road people, right? The ones that are like, I'm open-minded enough to see what they have to say. Because there's certainly been a lot said, right? And I think some of the delivery that we've seen has been good. I thought Kinzinger was solid the other day, honestly. Seeing Representative Kinzinger on there, I think he did a pretty solid job on that.
Absolutely. I think he killed it. He nailed it. I didn't know too much about the guy before.
Military veteran.
Yeah, another military veteran, so shout out to that. But I think he did a great job, and I was really impressed with the way he handled the content and set up the interviews, and just his overall professionalism was good.
Yeah. I mean, Kinzinger is interesting in and of himself, in that, you know, you kind of sit there and you look at the guy, and he chose not to run again. And, you know, a lot of people have said, well, he chose not to run again because he knew his political future was over, at least for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Kinzinger is interesting in the sense that, like, I don't think we've seen the last of Adam Kinzinger, if that makes sense, right? I think he wants to come back. I don't think he wants to be done with politics. I think he's got a real burning desire in his heart to serve, right? We saw that with his military service. I think he wants to continue serving the country. But I think he doesn't know where to go next, if that makes sense. And I think he's trying to test the waters for kind of how he wants to be. And I think he's perfectly okay taking a break right now. Again, he said it himself. I'm probably not going to win based on things I've said. I'm probably going to get primaried out in a Republican primary. So I think Kinzinger is just kind of testing the waters, trying to see where he goes in the future. And you know, some have even suggested, and I don't know how much he's really thought into this, but some have even suggested that people like Kinzinger are out there fishing for, just kind of fishing around to see about the possibility of even maybe starting a legitimate third party. When I say legitimate, I get it. There are other parties in the country, but you know, this idea or this facade, if you will, that always kind of floats around, like, are we going to get this middle of the road centrist type party? And some have suggested maybe Kinzinger is testing the waters for that. And I don't know if I agree 100% with that, but I think the thought has probably crossed his mind.
Yeah, I 100% disagree with that. The middle of the road party. I think, like, but again, I'm on the left side of things, and I think what I think, and I believe what I believe, and I think that centrist idea is broken and has led us to exactly the spot we're in now, right? The time for Senator Biden's and Senator the guy from Arizona that died a couple years ago.
Oh, you're talking about John McCain.
John McCain.
Yeah, John McCain. And throw Joe Manchin in there,
Joe
right?
Manchin. Yeah, I think the time for those guys is over because trying to play that centrist role works for some places, right? It works for Canada because everybody there is fairly centrist and they can do it, and nobody's too far out on the left or right. But in the U.S., it has led us to having a 6-3 Supreme Court that is robbing people of their fucking rights every day.
Well, again, I mean, we can agree to disagree on this. And maybe I'm this ever hopeful ideologue, right? That I keep seeing this middle of the road party, and I listen to, people like Michael Smirkonish and some that suggest, centrist this and centrist that, and the country's craving it. I really do, though. I think there is a nice sized portion of the country that is hungry for middle of the road again. And does it mean that they'll necessarily get everything they want? No, I think they're okay just kind of, giving a little here and there, but I think they want some stability in their life, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for.
Well, yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's what everybody wants, is they want stability. They want their kids to be safe and get a good education and be successful, and they want to get paid reasonable wage for working, and they want to not have to worry about healthcare and things like that, and they want to go to church on Sundays. They want to do all these things that we always associate with what's so-called the American dream. The problem is if I reframed those points and had AOC talk about them, she's a radical leftist. And those are radical left talking points. That's why I don't even think I'm really that far left. I think it's just being framed that I'm that far left.
Well, and certainly there's a part of politics, right, that frames, right? And that's part of how you sell yourself as a politician, right? I mean, you can frame it going this way, you can frame yourself going that way. And honestly, I think my 2 cents on this. Now, I've never run for public office or anything like that. God help us if I ever did, right? But
well, I think both of us would be good, mostly because we're reasonable, I think, right? And we're willing to sit here and have this discussion.
Have a discussion, yeah. Unlike, what is it I say, 98% of the country.
Yeah.
But Anyway, I think a lot of what politics is, though, is really your image, and I think you go off that image, right? I look at some of these politicians, and I mean, I think there are politicians out there that three-quarters of the country has no idea what they even stand for, but they just like the image. They see someone like a John McCain come across, or they see someone like, Joe Manchin, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Whoever's got that image that they like, and they just kind of endure to that. And I think that's kind of, I think that's part of how just politics works. My 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Okay. So you're giving me the signal to move on. I'll do it. I just will say that if you haven't seen it and you care to see it, Kinzinger's opening statement absolutely killed.
Oh.
And to anybody who may listen to this, if you have not seen it, go just if the only thing that you watch is the Kinzinger's opening statement on Thursday. That was like the most amazing.
I told you, I think Kinzinger's doing a nice job on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more they can get him out there, the better. And like I said, I think Adam Kinzinger is a guy who just kind of speaks from the heart. And again, you look at somebody, whether it be a Kinzinger or a Liz Cheney, right? Somebody who knows that they are bucking a lot in their own party mm-hmm. and doing what they're just going to do anyway, right? I mean, you have to tip your hat to that, whether you agree with them or not, and give them some, show them some love, I guess, if you will, for doing that. So, no, I think anytime you get a chance to see Kinzinger with this January 6th committee, he's putting out some good material. He's doing a good job.
Yeah, and, it should be noted, too, that we have yet to see half of the people from that committee speak. So, Elaine Luria, shout out to the U.S. Navy vet.
She is, yep, 20 years.
And a good one, too, it looks like. And Jamie Raskin, my favorite, obviously, because of his work that he's done before with the impeachment and whatnot.
Well, so, yeah, but again, I think this goes back to, it goes back to that whole marathon thing that I talked about earlier, right? And the committee knows that they are running a marathon. Mm. And so they're going to pace themselves as they go along, and they're going to, move only as much as they need to, right, without unloading everything.
Yeah, the closer we get to November with these hearings still going, the mm-hmm. better off we are, I think, as a society and a country.
And I think they're going to keep it going for a while yet.
Yeah. So I do think we can't obviously go too far without mentioning the Supreme Court this week.
You think?
Yes, SCOTUS obviously dropped a couple of bombs, 4 major ones, I think, or 5, I think.
Who's counting?
It's there's voting rights based out of the North Carolina ruling, New York with the guns, obviously Roe v. Wade. We'll hit
that's
on.
A whole
we'll
segment
get to that.
in and of itself.
What was the other?
Well, you had the religious
schools.
Yep,
the schools. So a couple of big decisions. Obviously, my thoughts are that this does not reflect a majority of the country at all. I mean, I'm kind of neutral on the North Carolina thing, and I haven't read too much up on it. But, the voting ID thing, should you have to have an ID to vote? Yes, probably. But do we live in an environment where everybody who's eligible to vote has an ID? I mean, especially in a state like North Carolina. I mean, is that a reality? Some people just don't drive and don't have a reason to have a license. And some people just...
Well, I think the thought there, right, has been, if you don't drive,
mm-hmm.
To just get a generic, federal ID card, I think is the thought, right, or a state-issued ID card, because you can get those.
True, but what if you're 78 years old and you've got diabetes and you're immobile, and you just live in a home on, Social Security or whatnot, and your ID expires, do you go get a new ID?
Well, and that's the question that people have to ask, right?
Yeah, I mean...
But I think that's the thought behind this, right, is that everybody should have an ID card. And maybe what you look at with the older seniors that are in nursing homes or whatever is maybe you just make them a long-term standing ID card. Yeah. I'll admit I'm not an expert in how each state issues their ID cards, so I don't know how many years they even put in there. But I think that's one way to maybe get around for the elderly would be to issue them long-term, especially if you're in... the care of a senior living facility or something like that would be to issue them something long term. Yeah. Because I'm of the mindset that I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say if you want to vote, where's your ID? That's my two
no,
cents on it, because it's just like driving a car.
I
right?
agree. I don't think it's unreasonable too. The problem is you can do a lot of other things without an ID that you probably shouldn't be able to do. And voting is the one thing we've already seen based on January 6th committee evidence and what we already knew to be true. The amount of like false votings, or false voting and illegitimate voting that happened in the last couple of elections were mostly Republican votes and were so few that it would never have had an effect on anything. So why are we trying to legislate voting?
So I would say,
Why are we trying to fix something that's not broken?
I mean, I would say you can talk about there were some illegitimate Republican votes. I was going to say, I think there was just so few that who's even counting. There just didn't seem to be very many at all.
The bottom line is, who cares? So why are we trying to mess with it? And I guess my point is I totally agree. I think maybe you should have to have an ID to vote. But the process isn't broken, so what are we trying to solve? Why do we need the Supreme Court involved in a process that's not broken? And I think the only reason we can answer that question is because we've got a radically conservative Supreme Court with some unqualified people, some people who probably should not be on the Supreme Court based on their wife's activities.
I mean, that's subjective on some of those things as far as the qualifications go. But
come on, man. Coney Barrett's not qualified.
Well, we can have a whole segment of the Supreme Court.
Actually, all three, based on the fact that Merrick Garland's nomination was never heard, I would say all three of Trump's are illegitimate.
Well, I mean, I think so. Again, I mean, not to go too far off on these judges, but I mean, at the end of the day, this is what I just tell people, right? If you are nominated for the Supreme Court, the president makes a decision to nominate you. At that point, the Senate has a job to do. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think it's actually fairly simple. Now, we've made it into this grandstanding theatrical hearing. Both sides have, right? Whenever we put a judge up, it's like, oh, dear God, let's pull out.
Or we've made it into no hearing at all for Merrick Garland.
Well, okay.
And then and keep in mind, Coney Barrett was rushed through in way closer to an election than...
Okay, but I mean, going back to what I was saying, though, just in general, right? The Senate has one job to do when it comes to these Supreme Court judges. And like I was saying, it gets blown into this huge spectacle. But in reality, what is the Supreme Court, I keep saying Supreme Court, what is the Senate supposed to do with a nominee?
Confirm them.
Yes, but they're supposed to first just interview them to find out if they're qualified or not, right? Yeah. And it's not even just the interview. A lot of it really is reviewing their record. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what it should be. You know, I think this idea that let's sit them on the stand and grill them for 6 hours and, beat on them to see their temperament and stuff makes for some good TV, makes for some feel-good, I suppose, cable TV discussion at night. But in reality, really what the Senate is supposed to do is supposed to sit and talk to a judge, sift through their record, and determine, are you qualified to be a judge? Whether I agree with you or not, are you qualified to be a judge on whatever court it is, Supreme Court in this case, or are you not? Right? And we saw that some recently with the KBJ hearings, right? That was certainly one of the things. Mitt Romney came out and said that, right? Mm-hmm. He said, hey, I may not agree with this woman on everything or every decision that she's going to make, and who knows how many years she'll sit on the bench. But he said it himself, and in his statement, he said, but she is qualified, very qualified to be a judge. Now, interestingly enough, somebody that we saw this a lot with some of the lower court appointees over the last year or so that Biden put up, mm-hmm. Lindsey Graham nominated most of them. And he would come out and say, look, all I'm doing is I'm reading through here and seeing if they're qualified to be a judge or not.
Yeah, he's doing his fucking job.
But that's what I'm saying, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's the big picture with this, right? And so, I mean, I looking at Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, I think they're qualified, mm-hmm. right? They're qualified. Now, Barrett is one that I think, and I'm not a lawyer, so if you're a lawyer out there in listener land, please cut me some slack. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
But just kind of what I've seen, right, and some lawyer discussions I've heard and some legal discussions that I've heard with people, that's the one that I think they say, hey, she didn't have maybe the record that some of these others have had that we put in the court. But I think if you look at them, right, whether you agree or not, right, Alito had a lengthy, right, legal career, right? Gorsuch has spent his time around, right? These guys have been around for a number of years. And so, again, whether we agree with them or not, but that's one thing. But are they qualified? I think by and large they are. But with that being said, what we've got, right, is now we've got one that is definitely leaning conservative, and we've seen that with how they've been voting, right? Certainly with the three recent appointees, or the three Trump appointees, Alito, Thomas, definitely going that route. I mean, the interesting one is John Roberts, right? Kind of the Chief Justice John Roberts, the swing vote. Sometimes people would even say, even though I don't really know that he's a true swing vote, I think he definitely leans conservative. And to be fair, that's how Justice Roberts has been over the years, right?
Cam, if you get Roberts to swing, you still lose in a 5-4 decision.
Well, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying he's kind of that. If you have a middle of the road judge right now, I think Roberts is probably your middle of the road guy.
I agree. However, I think weren't all these decisions this week 6-3 votes.
All were except for the Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade was 6-3, I thought.
So a part of Roe v. Wade, and we're gonna get to Roe v. Wade in a second, but a part of Roe v. Wade. Okay, let me make sure I get this right. There was two parts to Roe v. Wade. One part was 6-3. That was the one that gave it back to the states. But then the actual overturning of Roe v. Wade itself was 5-4.
Okay.
Roberts did vote on that, and I was actually going to speak to that here in a little bit when we get into Roe v. Wade.
Okay.
Kind of what the Chief Justice was trying to do, as it was explained to me.
So next, we have the gun decision in New York, basically approving constitutional carry, or what people refer to as constitutional carry. So let me first say that constitutional carry has nothing to do with the Constitution. And if the decision in North Carolina for the voting ID law is based on giving it back to the states, why do we turn around and make the next decision about the gun rights law to take it away from the states and say the federal government is going to overrule that? Is that not blatant hypocrisy?
Well, it is interesting how they have their ruling, and then 24 hours later, we have the gun bill passing through the House, and it had gotten through the Senate. Yet again, right? We see the courts certainly taking their conservative stance. Right?
But is it not blatant hypocrisy?
I mean, it depends on how you're looking at it.
I mean, what do you think?
On the guns themselves?
No. To say in one case we'll leave it with the state because we think the state should be making these decisions, not the Supreme Court.
Oh, you're talking about like Roe v. Wade to the guns.
No, I'm saying making one decision say the state made the decision, we're going to leave it there, and on the other one say nope, the state made a decision, screw the state, the Supreme Court will rule.
In other words, like cherry picking how you go. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Is that not blatant hypocrisy?
Well, and that's where you got to be careful, right? I mean, if you want to stick to the...
I don't have to be careful.
Well, not you, but I'm saying like, people practicing law, et cetera, right? I mean, or Supreme Court for that matter, right? If you want to be, as you said, if you want to be consistent, right, you can't be backpedaling one or the other.
So, blatant hypocrisy? I mean,
it's like I'm getting pinned in the corner here. Like,
I'm just trying to get an answer. I mean, like that's the way I.
No,
feel
I mean,
it.
It does seem to be, and certainly from the outside looking in, it does seem to be that way.
Yeah. Okay. And then so the gun decision, whatever, like constitutional carry, basically for the state of New York, which has nothing to do with the Constitution. It's just a marketing term that the NRA used. And then,
I think the schools one is interesting.
Oh yeah, screw that. I mean, we have to use tax dollars to fund religious schools.
Well, that's where I think that one is interesting, and that's where I think that one is a slippery slope. I've said for ever and a day that separation of church and state needs to be a thing in this country.
Yeah, and then I look at it from the privatization of education standpoint, which we should probably do a whole episode about that later on when the news cycle isn't so crazy. Because I think that there's some really interesting points that I've heard some people talk about how, it's like the government has allowed the military to effectively be privatized. They've allowed for the prison system to be privatized. They've allowed for our borders to effectively be privatized. They've allowed for all these things, and the last big non-private entity we have out there is our education system. And I think it's a shame that it almost looks like that's trying to be privatized. Now, I think we should get into that later. I don't think we should talk about it now. But I think it is an interesting point, and I think that that's a really bad. That's like I think that one went under the radar for the most part because it got trumped by.
I was going to say I think
it got trumped by Wednesday and Thursday.
I was about to say that too. I think that was the appetizer that just sort of wasn't, you know.
Yeah, and nobody got any time to talk about it because the Supreme Court effectively flew this one under the radar by coming out with bigger and bigger decisions that got more headlines, and then which culminated in Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I wanted to make mention of it quick though because I think, like you said, it was kind of the issue that never became anything, or at least as far as talking about it. Really, I shouldn't say never became anything, but it was kind of the issue that wasn't really ever talked about or not much. You kind of almost had to dig to find stuff on it, and I thought that one was big. I think.
Okay, so if you I agree, and so if you're a religious school. And also a church, because almost all religious schools are associated with a certain church.
Sure, they're affiliated with one, yeah.
Do they have to pay taxes? Why are they getting a piece of the pie without contributing anything to the piece of the pie?
And see, that's where I think this gets dangerous, right? And, I do. I think anytime, and you said this a minute ago, anytime you start bringing a church, pick one, I mean, and there's countless of them, right? But anytime you want to put one of those, blend one in with the government, I think that is just a slippery slope we don't want to go down. Now, there are others that argue with me. My goodness, I hear arguments all day long from friends of mine and folks that I know that want to, that say, well, we're a Christian nation and we should be this, that, and the other. I look at the Founding Fathers, and by the way, I've got a couple degrees in history, so I like to think I know a little bit about that, but I really don't think they were as Christian as a lot of people think. I mean, looking at some Ben Franklin certainly strayed, and Jefferson was a deist, and we could go on, right?
But let's be real. The country was founded on getting rid of religious oppression.
Well, that's what I was going to say, right? These founding fathers had seen what England had done with the Church of England and how it was basically in the driver's seat, and how other countries around the world had kind of done it, how they had grown up around a religion, and that was, I think anyway, and I think their writings support it, was the Founding Fathers had a different idea for this country.
Yeah.
And I think that was to keep the church away. Now, I'm not saying that to be anti-religious, and I'm not saying that to be, saying that to be against the church. That's fine. That we have freedom of religion in this country for a reason, to go worship however you want to on a Sunday or Saturday, whatever day your Sabbath happens to be.
And with that being said, I mean, I don't get it, right? Like, I don't get it, but maybe that's because I don't practice. But yeah, the freedom to do it should be there, but we should also have this separation, right?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, freedom to do it, but then I think we are too big and too diversified of a country to be trying to have the Catholic Church run this country or the Southern Baptist Church or whatever, right? We're too big of a nation, and we just, in my 2 cents, weren't even founded upon that. So yeah, I think we need to separate.
Yeah.
And keep things separate.
Yeah, it's almost like we invaded Afghanistan to bring like Sharia law back home or something. It's like,
I mean, yet again, that's the danger. Depending on how far you want to take the religion piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, where are we going with this stuff? Okay, and then, with that being said, yeah, we can have a whole other episode on the privatizing schools, but.
Which I think is interesting, by the way. That would be a really interesting show or a segment to talk about that one.
Now, do we dig into Roe v. Wade? I mean...
Well, but there's a lot to unpack there. So I think, to be fair, we were talking about this kind of even before we recorded. That's kind of the big one, right? That big elephant that's sitting in the room there.
Yeah.
And I think we have no choice but to get into it. The big... landmark overturning that was yesterday. And so, I'll let you start off if you want with that, and I've certainly got my thoughts on it too.
Well, I don't know even how to start off with this other than to just say what are we doing, man? This is like so absurd that the Supreme Court is upending precedent that's like not only are they upending precedent, but in the concurring decision that Thomas wrote, he said that because of this, now it's time to look back into same-sex marriage equality and birth control, the ability to, like, what?
Yeah.
Like, not only it reminds me of that when they first leaked the thing about Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
What was it? It was like the domestic supply of infants or something.
Something
Like
that,
that's
yeah.
that just makes me go back to my she's unqualified to be on the Supreme Court and just hit it. Like to write the domestic supply of infants when you're talking about like babies.
So
to dehumanize them in the same process that you're humanizing them by calling them lives that should have rights blows my mind at how that's even possible. The domestic supply of infants, and keep in mind that was written in the effort to humanize them and give them rights.
So here's,
I mean, like, does that not sound like ridiculous?
well, so here's, I was getting ready to say here's my 2 cents on this, but it's not 2 cents. I mean, this is there's too much here to call it 2 cents.
Yeah.
No, this is the big one, right? And so you certainly just brought up some interesting points. I look at it like this, right? Now, obviously, this is a passionate issue. There's certainly two different sides, and there is some neutral ground in this one. We've seen it, right? But you've got two sides really done.
Well, what is the neutral ground?
Well, what I was going to say by the neutral ground was there are some we've seen that are calling themselves neutral, or when I should say neutral, saying, I'm not really necessarily for abortion, but I'm okay with people having the right to choose. I consider that a little bit more of the middle of the road.
I mean, if I was playing the radical left part of this duo, I would say that, like, that's my opinion, and I think that that's what's considered left. Is like we chose not to have an abortion. We didn't really want a kid. And we weren't trying to have a kid, and so it was kind of like, oops, but it ended up being like one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me, and we discussed it, and then decided that wasn't principle for either of us, and so I had my daughter,
yeah.
Right? Now, with that being said, nobody out there is like for abortion. There's not a single person in this country, I believe at least. I could be wrong.
Well, you never know.
One day we'll get an email address and some social media. So if somebody listens to this and they're like, yeah, everybody should have abortion at least once. Like, if you haven't tried it, how do you know you don't like it? Or something like that. I don't think anybody in the country feels that way about abortion.
Yeah,
so when you say middle ground, I say the middle ground is everybody besides the people who think abortion shouldn't be allowed are apparently the middle ground.
Well, and
that we can circle that back to the middle ground doesn't. I don't believe the middle ground exists really.
Well, I do, but
yeah.
But anyway, no. But okay. So my 2 cents, so kind of on the issue as a whole, right? Passionate issue, two sides.
Mm-hmm.
This is my big thing, and what I've said for years on this is, it's not going away, people. This is not an issue that you're going to end, right? I mean, as far as abortions happening in this country, it's not going away. I don't care how much you restrict it or how much you try and restrict it. And that's the big thing that I hear from a lot of church groups and pro-life people is, well, we want to end the killing of babies, right? We want to end abortion. But it doesn't end, right? We've seen this prior to Roe v. Wade and such, and prior to all that, abortions were happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's like prohibition.
Exactly, right? And here's the other thing, too. I think sometimes people have this idea, if you will, that they only happen in these large inner city areas. That's not true either, right?
Yeah, let's make abortion illegal just like heroin, so nobody will do it.
Yeah. Well, and so to your point, though, that's been this big thing, right? And I've said for years, hey, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to end. Like right now, right? I literally, after yesterday, you have pro-life groups doing victory laps around the country, right? And to be fair, I understand they're happy. They got something that they had wanted for decades now. But the reality is that it really doesn't change whether abortions are happening or not. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. Like, none of this changes that. And abortion's still legal in a number of states, although in the coming weeks they expect it to shrink as far as the number of states that it's legal in. But regardless, this is not...
I think, what is it, 26 states?
I've heard rumor of, but they're not to be fair, I don't know if all 26 are going to go that way.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think what I heard or what I've kind of read is there is a possibility for up to 26 to have it outlawed.
Yeah.
Or severely restricted, I think.
Have you seen like the maps though?
I
The
have,
show.
yeah.
What blows me away is that because I'm from Kansas, how is Kansas green on that map?
I was getting ready. I was thinking of that earlier when I was reading those maps. That was something I was going to ask you. Is I'm surprised Kansas is not.
Yeah, and it's funny because Minnesota, your state is an outlier too, but Minnesota's
pretty blue. That's pretty blue.
Largely
state.
blue.
Yeah,
and
Minnesota's
that I can
pretty
understand.
Blue.
But
yeah, Minnesota's pretty blue and gonna quite honestly stay blue. I think for a long.
Yeah, and now granted, Kansas has got a Democratic governor, but the wide control of everything else is Republican, and they have basically handcuffed her and not allowed her to do anything productive in the state. So
yeah.
it just seems weird to me that Kansas is still green in that. But you know what?
Too.
I will tell you that's one of the things I tell people all the time when we talk about abortion rights and stuff is that I grew up in that. Keep in mind, my hometown is where, they, bombed a abortion clinic, and, and there's, we had this rapper that was from the Kansas City area called Tech Nine, and he, rapped about it when I was a kid, about going to Missouri, or coming to Kansas to get an abortion because it's legal there and not in Missouri. So I remember when I learned to drive and I had a car, we would drive to the other side of town and there'd literally be on this giant street, there'd be people on both sides of the street. It's pro-life on one side and pro-choice on the other side, and they're standing out there holding signs thinking they're gonna I don't know, win or something. I don't know what,
Well, yeah, it's funny, right? So, it's interesting how the states will shake out. But what, like I said, I'm going to go back to that. It's not going to end, right? So, I mean, you can take the victory laps, etc. But here's where I think this becomes the big issue. Is I have said this for a while now, and I'll continue to say it. I think what just happened yesterday is going to damage the GOP for years to come. Here's why I say that, right? The Republican Party for years now has said we've got to grow our base. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't maybe hear it as much during the Trump years, but you can go back to, say, 2012, right? And I remember 2012, for example, when Mitt Romney lost to Obama. What were a number of Republican strategists saying? We have got to figure out a way to grow our base. We are hurting with younger voters, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and in 2016 they founded the Lincoln Project. By the way, those same guys,
well, yeah,
there's
that, right? But I just think that this, what I've seen at least, okay, with this issue is I think this is going to hurt them with a lot of young voters, right? People right now that are 15, 16, 17 years old that are about to, or just turned 18, that are either going to vote for the first time in the next year or two, or possibly even now this fall, they just turn 18, maybe vote this year in the midterm. It's going to be damaging there. And like I said,
so I'll give you the perfect example too, right? Is my kid, right? And I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she pointed out the fact that my daughter's Instagram is one of the funniest thing ever, because it's pro-choice, do something about gun control, social issue with Harry Styles and Taylor Swift sprinkled in the middle of it. You know what I mean? It's and so it's every other post is either Harry Styles or save kids' lives in schools.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This morning I saw an article from Politico, and it was titled, or it's something to the effect of, the abortion issue, the GOP is the dog that finally caught the car, right? Mm-hmm. And what this article basically, it kind of, it talked just about that, here, the dog finally, he's played the game of chasing the car forever and a day, and now he finally caught it, and oh, wait, now he's caught the car. And so that's, again, going back to this issue, right? This is an issue that a few weeks ago, and when the initial, the Supreme Court leaked their thoughts on Roe v. Wade, and the whole world was basically notified that it was about to be overturned. you didn't see the political needle move much in the country, right? I will tell you this. I went home yesterday afternoon and evening and such and started looking at my social media, and I just thought I would see a ton of stuff on there about pro-life and victory laps, etc., right? And it was quite honestly the opposite. I saw a lot of anger. I saw, and I will be honest with you, the friends that I had that were putting on their, hey, great day, Roe v. Wade overturned, there was a lot of comments slapping them right back in the face. And so I think there's a lot of anger on this. I look at, certainly was looking at, various programs last night and was seeing it. And there was a lot of people that are upset. There's a lot of people that are out there saying, hey, this might not be something I would have done or would do, but don't take that right away from me or my friends or whatever, right? And so that's where I think you've got to watch it. It's interesting, too, that I don't know if you've seen this yet, but we go back, and you were talking about the nominations to the Supreme Court under the Trump presidency a little while ago. Going back to Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, right?
Yeah, their hearings. Is that where you're going with this?
Well, no, I was going to talk about their confirmation, right?
That's what I'm saying. Their confirmation hearings.
Yeah. Collins, Susan Collins had voted for him, as did Joe Manchin, right? And I don't remember if any other Democrats crossed over. I think on Kavanaugh, Manchin was the only Democrat. Bottom line.
They all said that they wouldn't mess with precedent.
Well, and Collins herself really asked him, and she brought that up. She specifically said, "Hey, I am a pro-choice woman, and this is an issue that is important to me." And Manchin has said, Manchin is interesting on his abortion rights thoughts, but I'll use Collins first. Okay, Susan Collins was someone who felt she had questioned Gorsuch and Kavanaugh both on those issues, and felt that she had gotten an answer that they were not going to mess with it, right? Essentially, right? It's precedent, et cetera, and they're not going to go back into it. And so now, today, I see articles saying Susan Collins is upset, saying she was lied to, right? Joe Manchin has said something similar. Now, Manchin's interesting in that early in the Manchin era...
It is a crime, though, to perjure in front of Congress, right?
Supposed to be.
Well, maybe when Merrick Garland gets done with Matt Gaetz, the sex offender thing, or maybe when he gets started with it at some point, we'll add that to the potential list of Justice Department,
He's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah.
But going back to Manchin's interesting with his abortion rights, because with Manchin, he early in his time in the Senate, etc., he was a pretty pro-life kind of guy. He'd even voted to defund Planned Parenthood and such, but I think it was in 2017 he voted to fund it. And in the last couple of years, he seems as if he's gone more on the pro-choice thing. And today he released, there was a statement from him saying, hey, I was raised pro-life, but I also understand other people have different views, and I respect that.
Yeah.
And I feel that I was lied to.
Yeah. And then you also bring up the whole Planned Parenthood thing, which is seems to be one of the biggest conspiracy theory things out there. Like, people think Planned Parenthood is something that is very much different than what it actually is, which is weird to me. And again, we don't have to delve into that, but so we had talked in the past, and to go back to where you were a couple of minutes ago, we had talked in the past, and you said, yes, this Roe v. Wade thing is going to hurt the GOP in the long term. And I think I told you, I think it's going to hurt the GOP in the short term. And I'm gonna bunker down with that. I think that this was a serious misstep. Now, it's not going to change the court, not going to change the makeup of the court, but I think this is going to push Republicans off the edge in November.
Well, so
we're going to get to this.
Well,
we'll get to the midterms, but we can go back to Roe v. Wade if you want to keep.
Well, I was just going to say, a couple of other things. Right now, I've already heard friends say, where do we go next? I mean, Thomas himself is hinting that he just wants to. He's going to hit a grand slam here. I mean, hey, you know what? You gave me abortion. I might as well take it all.
Yeah, let's burn the country down.
Well, I mean, so that's the new talk, right? It was interesting. I heard this discussion on somewhere, I don't remember where, but I heard a pro-life and a pro-choice person debating back and forth, and the pro-life person said, "Don't worry, Alito has said he's not touching anything else."
Yeah.
And then everybody else in the show is like, where have we heard this before, right? No, I think Thomas, all indications are right. John Roberts is the Chief Justice, okay? But Roberts is also quite honestly, doesn't seem to be in control of his court right now. It is Thomas's court, and he knows it. And he's taking victory laps. By the way, I think Thursday was his birthday, or Friday. I think Thursday was his birthday. He turned 74, I think, or 72, I forget. But he celebrated his birthday with his Roe v. Wade. But there are a lot of people in this country now thinking the Supreme Court is going to now push the gay marriage, same-sex marriage, going to try and push. There's some, and I can't believe this, but there's some indication on the contraception.
Wait, yeah, and so I'm confused about that. Does that mean we get rid of birth control pills, or does that mean we get rid of birth control pills and condoms and because guess what? If you get rid of condoms, then we've got maybe a impending AIDS epidemic again, and looks like turns out monkeypox is sexually transmitted. It's like what are we doing? I mean, how far does that go?
So I don't know. I don't know what Justice Thomas has in mind. Maybe he'll come on the show and we can interview him and ask him that question directly.
Right.
If you're out there listening, Justice Thomas, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I wouldn't really love that.
But I think what we're seeing is, so there's people wondering how far they're going to go with it. And then, but like I said, I think early on there was indication needle wasn't moving. Mm-hmm. I started looking at things last night. I think the needle is moving. And I've been reading some articles this morning that are saying, some Republicans are waking up this morning saying, oh, this looks a little sticky now.
So, just to be clear, you're saying that I was probably right when I said it would affect the short term?
You know what? I'll give you that. I will I do. I will certainly give you partial.
Yeah.
Because to be fair,
I just love to be right. That's all I'm saying.
I like it too. But to be fair, though, right, in our private conversations for the listeners, right, that may not know this, you had said that, right? Mm-hmm. You had said, hey, I think this affects them in the short term. And I said, I think it's more of a long-term thing. I think 5 to 10 years down the road. I think there is some short term. Interestingly enough, I heard something this morning that I thought was kind of, interesting. They said, have you noticed how Donald Trump hasn't hardly said a word about abortion back when the Roe v. Wade thoughts were leaked in May or now, right? Now that it's out and, we've seen some Catholic bishops, we've seen some pro-life groups, but haven't seen that many Republican Congress, senators, etc., taking victory laps. And Donald Trump hasn't hardly said a word about abortion. Now, there's a couple thoughts there. One, and I've kind of believed this, I don't think Donald Trump cares at all about abortion. He was a pro-choice guy for almost his entire life.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, and Donald Trump, when he decided to be a politician in 2016, or 2015, I guess, when he announced his candidacy, looks at this, says, hey, I'm going to run as a Republican. How can I get them on board? Oh, big issue. Let me side up with him on the guns and the abortion, and I got him in my back pocket, and the rest is history.
Yeah, but I don't even think it's that. I think that because he's so self-concerned with what makes him richer, and what does what it does for him. I think that when the evangelical money started coming in, he said, "Okay, you tell me what to do," because that's like that. That's like that clip of him in the White House after one of the mass shootings, right? And he said, well, surely there's something, surely we could do something about this. And then the people around him whisper in each other's ears and talk about, well, the NRA is paying for a lot of what you have. And then he says, oh, okay, no, I guess you're right. Never mind.
Yeah, well, no, I don't disagree with you on that. That's what I was saying. I meant as a person, as a personal thought of his. I don't think Donald Trump really cared about abortion one way or the other.
I don't think he cared about anything but himself.
Well, but I'll stick with the abortion, right? What they're saying is, though, interestingly enough, is people apparently close to Trump are saying now he's nervous. Mm-hmm. And he's nervous looking ahead saying, oh, crap, what are we going to do about suburban voters and these swing voters and these independents that in 2016 he got on board, right? Yeah. There were a lot of these. We always talk about these suburban women, these soccer moms that are voting for him, et cetera, these moderate Republicans that are out there that came to roost with Donald Trump. Well, now he's worried he's not going to have them, right? And this idea he's got of a 2024 run, he's worried he may not have them. And there are other Republicans that are waking up this morning thinking, oh,
I don't think so. Let me just say real quick, and then I think we do kind of shift into midterms, but we can talk a little bit more about it just because we are running up on an hour.
Yeah.
I will say, I don't think Trump is going to run in 2024. And I'm a religious, listener to Michael Cohen, and he says the same thing. But I think he has the exact right take. And keep in mind, the guy knows him probably better than anybody else.
Certainly better than you and I.
Yeah, and he probably knows Trump better than some of his kids, honestly.
I mean, yeah.
But Michael Cohen basically takes the viewpoint that he's too much of a pussy to run in 2024 because he won't be able to withstand losing again.
Oh, I've heard that from others too. I mean, it's not just Cohen. I've heard that from others, right?
Yeah.
There are a number of people that have said that.
Yeah, and we've seen in the past couple of weeks it basically being demonstrated that he can't take the L.
Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, he just can't do it. I mean,
I'm not going to argue with you on that.
He fought it tooth and nail, and then even when it was time for the peaceful transition of power to actually happen, he got on a helicopter and went to Mar-a-Lago with boxes of classified material.
So no, I'm not going to argue with you on that. I think we see that. But I guess what I'm getting at though is there are people in his inner circle saying that he is feeling, again, apparently he's held personal. He apparently some say that he personally still feels like pro-choice is how he is. He just doesn't publicly say that. And there's a different Donald Trump in private than what we see in public. Now, I'm not speaking for the former president saying that he's pro-choice, but that's just some whisperings that I've heard. And he certainly publicly was for a number of years.
You say you haven't heard him say anything about it. I mean, I haven't either, but I don't listen to anything that he says, so that could be why.
Well, he's kind of limited on his delivery that he can do right now, right? I mean, he's not on many platforms. But again, I think, and I'm ready to transition this into the midterms because we have kind of set the table with the Roe v. Wade thing. But again, I will just wrap this part up by saying this: there's a lot of anger out there right now over Roe v. Wade. More than I quite honestly thought, and a lot of this I'm just gleaning by talking to people and social media. I will tell you. I was in a class yesterday, and when word got out in the class what had happened, it was like a bomb went off in there. Mm-hmm. Now, over half the class is female, and you could see a look of anger on faces. And there is, and yeah, like I said, I was surprised seeing the amount of, well, maybe I shouldn't say surprised. Mm-hmm. I will just say there is a lot of anger, a lot of hard feelings out there, and a lot of people that are upset. And I think this is an issue that is going to galvanize the Republic, or this is going to galvanize the Democrats. And I will say this is a year for the Republicans. They should be slam dunking in the midterms. You got $5, all indications are $6 by Labor Day a gallon gas. Mm-hmm. You've got inflation running who knows how far off. You've got food prices rising. I mean, they're talking about, 12 to 13% increase on meat in the last year, whatever it's been, right? Yeah, inflation. But that should be the table should be set for Republicans. And Politico had that article saying the table was set. You didn't even need to drop Roe v. Wade. You could have waited. Like, they could have punted this for a year or two, right? Mm-hmm. When, hey, we need something all of a sudden because things aren't quite going. Boom, dropping it down. Well, no, you tried to swing for the fences all in 1 year, and now there are Republican strategists who, by the way, wanted to remain anonymous, who were saying, we should not have done this. We have poked the bear, stirred a hornet's nest, when we thought we had a clear, smooth sailing all the way into the midterms, and it was all going to be ours, and we'd have the table set for 2024 to take the White House. And now they're saying, I don't know, we might have just really poked a issue. Yeah, I don't think they were ready for what's happening.
It's funny that you mentioned the class. Now, I will say your demographic of people that you're around is a little bit different than mine, considering that pretty much, probably 90% of your students have been to college. And are probably...
Actually, this wasn't even my class, so this was a separate class I was in.
Yeah, but either way, it's a school for officers, so almost all of them have been to college, if not all of them. Whereas I heard stuff from my junior sailors yesterday about it, and one of the guys who doesn't seem very politically engaged. Now, granted, we can't really talk about it that much at work because of the Hatch Act and whatnot. but they guys that never have said anything to me about what's going on in the actual world, or the political environment, asked me about it, and even said it was all over their social media, and this is all they were seeing. And so,
Yep.
and I think that this is going to engage a lot of people who have never voted before in their life to get out and vote, and people that didn't really care about what's going on is alarmed. And not to mention, the other thing too is that if you were a freshman at Parkland High School, you're now part of the voting block.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of like I was saying,
You
these
know,
younger voters that are coming.
Yeah, and I think this is gonna. You're right. This is gonna piss a lot of people off.
Speaking of that, interesting thing before we segue into the midterms too. I guess I'm totally shifting gears on this, but you're talking about the young voters. They got issues. I mean, like 80. I saw a poll the other day said 82% of the Generation Z has like their number one issue they're concerned about right now is gun violence.
Yeah.
And so that's what we see kind of in this Gen Z as they get ready to vote. They're going to be a voting bloc. And now I will say this too. We tend to see, or have over time, tended to see younger people more liberal. And then as they get a little older and marry and have families, they tend to become more conservative.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, effectively, the hippies, the generation of people that were all about peace, love, and rock and roll, are like fucked our country up. So, I mean, I would agree with that 100%. Like, the baby boomers have done more damage to this government in this country than anybody else, and they were supposed to be. I mean, they followed the greatest generation, right? And the boomers suck, legitimately.
all right.
Sorry, mom and dad.
I was going to say, if anybody's listening out there that's a boomer, we don't feel that way about all of you.
Yeah, not all of them, but I'm just saying that some of those people are the ones that are like screwing over the country.
So let's take a look at the midterms. I think it's hard not to now. We certainly set the table with some of the Supreme Court stuff. I just want to say this on the midterms. I still think it is the Republicans' House this year. I think they take the House back. I saw a poll or something earlier that said, or rather it was a political strategist said they thought they were leaning towards the Republicans maybe gaining up to 45 seats this year. They now think after the Supreme Court rulings this week, especially Roe v. Wade, that number's dropped off. They're trending more on the 30s, perhaps even down in the 20s is all the seats they gain. So they think it's going to be an impact. Mm-hmm. Although there isn't, I don't think there's a political strategist out there that thinks that Roe v. Wade moved the needle so much that the Republicans are going to lose the House. But where I think actually the Democrats still have a shot is in the Senate. And I actually think, now, people think I'm crazy for saying this. People disagree with me left and right. But I think the Democrats, like them, love them, hate them, whatever, I think they have a real shot this year at holding the Senate down. Now, and I will tell you why, right? Kind of looking at these races that we've got out there. And please jump in if you agree with me or disagree with me on the House and the Senate piece, kind of before I go into the states. I mean, do you have thoughts you want to share on that, or?
No, I just am pretty optimistic about it, and I told you in the past that I think when I looked at the numbers at one point, and this was probably 2 months ago when we talked about this.
Yeah, right around.
I said, I think +3 in the Senate, and I don't remember what I said in the House, but it was optimistic.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was.
I think it was like less than 6 or something. We would lose less than 6 seats in the House, and we're going to gain 3 in the Senate. I will say, by the numbers, I think I'm even more optimistic than I was. I don't think we're going to get more than 3 seats in the Senate, but I think we are not going to lose that much in the House now.
So, I mean, I definitely think the Republicans take the House. I think the big question is going to be by how much. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have not broke down every single House race out there, so I don't know that I can sit and speak on all of them, and I quite honestly don't know if we have time on that one. But I think the Republicans still take it. Indications are now 20 to 30 seats is what a lot of the experts are saying. The Senate, though, is interesting, and there's some key Senate races that I've keyed in on. Pennsylvania, Toomey retiring there in Pennsylvania. I think that one looks. I was looking at the numbers last night. Some polls out of Pennsylvania, some recent polls are showing Fetterman. Because there we got Fetterman running, and that's going to be, I think, a pretty high-profile race. By the way, Fetterman running against Dr. Oz. Being behind Fetterman by, I'm seeing 6 points. Some polls showing maybe even a little more than that.
Yeah.
Fetterman has got this way he connects with voters, and he is now obviously he's had some medical issues that he's had to watch, but he's got a way of just going around rural Pennsylvania. He himself said he likes to go into small town Pennsylvania, into what he calls Trump country, and connect with voters. I mean, the guy walks around in a hoodie and gym shorts, right? He doesn't look like a politician at all. And interestingly enough, I've heard things out of Pennsylvania where everyday citizens say, hey, I like this guy because I can connect with him. He walks around, he sits down and has a cup of coffee with us. He talks like the average Joe, everyday citizen, etc. So I think Fetterman is going to flip Pennsylvania to the Democrats. I think North Carolina's got a tight race. I think that the Democrats have a shot at taking a seat down there. Nevada's a closely contested race. The Republicans are threatening to take Nevada, but I think Nevada's gonna be probably one to watch, and I have a feeling that we'll be talking about Nevada a lot in the coming weeks. Arizona, Kelly's putting up a fight down there in Arizona.
I think we're gonna lose Nevada, but I think Kelly's gonna stay in
Arizona. Yeah, I was gonna say I think Nevada's gonna be tight. I think Arizona goes. I think Kelly probably has a shot there. Georgia is one to watch, and I will say this, right? Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock. That's.
I don't even think that's anywhere in question. I think Herschel Walker, every day that goes by, Herschel Walker makes himself look worse and worse.
Well,
and I think that Georgia is one of those states that is the canary in the coal mine for voters getting engaged and coming out and doing what I would say is the right thing.
Well, I was just going to say this on that race. I've heard a lot of the experts swing Georgia this time to the right, saying, hey, that Georgia's ready to go back on the red. They're looking for Walker to win. But I will say this, watching the polls, Warnock and him are in a tight race, and Warnock won before down there, right? He's shown he can do it. And so I think that one's going to be one to really watch, but I will not be the least bit surprised if Warnock wins again down there. Yeah. I think you're right. Herschel Walker has shown himself to struggle, with some of the things he said, etc. There are other races though that the Republicans certainly have a leg up on, right? I mean,
not Wisconsin. So I think Wisconsin's going to go blue. I think Ron Johnson's going to lose.
So Wisconsin was another one that I had on my list. Johnson's in a tough fight there. Mm-hmm. And Johnson, it's interesting, he's the incumbent. By the way, Ron Johnson, Mankato, Minnesota is where he's from, not far from where I grew up. I believe he was around 18 or 19 when he moved to Wisconsin. But Senator Johnson is in a tough race in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I think indications are that he may very well lose. Now, that being said, Johnson's had tough races before and he's come out, ahead in them. So I wouldn't call him dead, but I think he's got a dogfight on his hand. But there are some other races that are going to go solid. Rand Paul is not going to lose in Kentucky.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and we've talked about that before.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's some very solid ones. I'm going to throw one more out there really quick. I would watch Florida, and everybody's going to laugh at me when I say that, but Marco Rubio running against Val Demings. Marco Rubio, I feel like, in 2016 when he was running against Trump, I think Trump gut punched that guy hard and took the wind out, and I feel like Rubio's had a hard time getting the wind back in his lungs.
It's weird that you don't even see him anymore.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't see much of him, right? I mean, you just said it. You don't really see the guy around, whereas in like 2014, 2015, he was this up-and-coming guy of the Republican Party. I had certainly taken notice of him. I was like, wow, this guy looks like he's going to go a long way.
I mean, granted, I was still... I still thought I was a Republican then. And so I was looking at him or Kasich for president.
Well, and so that's where I say I would watch him. I think Demings has made a name for herself down there in Florida politics, and I think that race may actually turn out to be closer than we think. Now, I think Rubio wins it. Let's face it. At the
I don't
end
know.
of
I'll
the day,
be honest with you. Demings can communicate
and
really well, and
I think
I
she'll be
heard her on
tough.
I heard her on a podcast, and she was amazing. So
I think it'll be tough. That's all I'm saying. I think that race gets closer than you think, and I think that's a race we talk about more in the coming months. But I will say this. I think Rubio's going to have a fight on his hands. I think he wins. I do think he wins that race down there, but I don't know if Florida's maybe as red as some people think it is. And I think Rubio will have a fight in his hands. I'll say that. So that's my 2 cents in the Senate. I'm going to be honest with you. In the coming months, expect a lot more discussion on that. Why? Because I just like looking at these races and throwing my 2 cents
I think we
in.
probably need to dedicate more time to it. But I will probably say it's time to cut it off for now.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it has. Not bad for our first one. Hopefully it sounds good. We'll find all that out later. But definitely, great to actually bring this to fruition and actually do it. So
yeah, I just want to say thanks for just allowing, if nothing else, me time to ramble for a bit, and hopefully to the folks that are listening. Well, hopefully someone is listening.
yeah, hopefully we get somebody to listen.
I was gonna say.
We'll start with that.
Hopefully, if you are a listener,
Yeah.
you liked what we had to say. Again, expect more of this coming. We'll bring differing opinions and thoughts in here, and please join us in the long haul on the ride.
Yeah, and hopefully the other part of that too is that maybe the news cycle will settle down at some point, so we could actually talk about other things. But yeah, we'll get there. Hey, thanks, Cam, and if you are listening, thanks for tuning into Pocket Politics.
See you later.
Bye.